it's important to find out whether people have access to books, number one, but then also do they have a learning difference that could cause another barrier on top of it? Once you know what it is that you're working with, then you can address it, then you can attack it, then you can find a way to overcome it, and then it can become your superpower. The past isn't silent, it's buried. Welcome to Hidden Heroines of History. I'm your host, Gayvin Powers, a published author, award-winning screenwriter, and storyteller who brings women's history to life. People are dealing with different barriers and resistance points to overcome to learn English, but I also know that people who have dyslexia have issues to overcome while trying to learn to read as well and have learning differences. And there was a study that came out of, I believe it was Harvard, did a study several years ago, and several of their students who were A students were struggling to pass the foreign language, and it's because they had dyslexia. And so they did a study testing them with the Orton-Gilliam method, and based upon chunking up information and teaching them foreign language in a different way, which is also how you teach students who have a learning difference so that they can learn to read as well. And then the students started excelling. And so these are the brightest of the brightest that we have that were struggling because they had learning differences based upon. That's amazing. There are things that can be done to help people as well. So it's important to find out whether people have access to books, number one, but then also do they have a learning difference that could cause another barrier on top of it? Once you know what it is that you're working with, then you can address it, then you can attack it, then you can find a way to overcome it, and then it can become your superpower. I know a student that when he went to first grade, his parents read to him every night before bed. He went to first grade and they tested him reading at a kindergarten level, which was very surprising. He ended up having the Orton-Gillingham method, and within 6 months, he was reading 2 years ahead of his other classmates.
Wow. Okay. I haven't heard of the Orton-Gillingham method. What's that?
It's amazing. It's a specific type of technique that teaches teachers how to teach students that have learning differences. And it basically chunks up material and it teaches them how to break it down so that people with those learning differences can grasp the information, they can process it in a way that their brains accept it, and then they can move on from there, which is amazing.
That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
How long's that method been around? Do you know roughly?
Hey, Claire, so you wanted to know how long the Orton-Gilliam approach has been around? It's been around for nearly a century. It was developed in the 1920s and 30s by a neurophysicist. It was developed in the 1920s and 30s by a neuropsychiatrist, Dr. Samuel Orton, an educator, Anna Gillingham, and it was done to help students with word blindness. That's what they're putting in there, which is also word blindness is what they used to call dyslexia, combining a multisensory systematic phonics for reading and spelling. And so it's the term Orton-Gillingham approach first appeared in print in 1966, but the methods themselves stem from Orton's work in the 90s and his collaboration with Gillingham in the 90s, making it a foundational, longstanding method in dyslexia remediation. So huge. That's amazing.
That
I
is.
had no idea.
No, nor me. Well, I've never heard of it until you mentioned it. But really brilliant.
Stunning,
Really
right?
brilliant. But isn't it interesting though that that was developed in the 1920s and 30s, and yet when I was at school in the 70s and 80s, people with dyslexia were being overlooked. I have a number of friends who are dyslexic, and they're all very intelligent people.
I have one friend, and she's brilliant. She's a science teacher, and she got diagnosed with dyslexia in college, and they looked at her results and were just shocked when they saw her brain scans come back, because they were like, this really should be hindering you, but you must be using every bit of all the other skills you have to be getting through. They were super impressed with how she had found a way on her own to be able to bypass all these other elements that were putting barriers in there. And I think a lot of people had to do that. Dyslexia appears in a lot of students is usually about the age of 14 over here in the United States.
Yes, it's interesting that you should say that, because as a flute teacher, 10s onwards, I became much more aware of dyslexia and how it affected students. I didn't realise that print could sort of leap about
Hmm.
on the page in front of their eyes. And then it would explain why they're struggling to read it. And of course,
Absolutely.
when you're reading music, you're combining letters with another type of symbol. So it's
Yes.
almost doubly hard in a way. So all of my students that were struggling to read paper, I took a photocopy of something they were playing and on 4 different colors. And I just said, just tell me which one is easier for you to read. And once they knew which color worked for them, I would just copy their music onto that color. But it was such a simple thing. And it made such an enormous difference. And it just got me thinking, well, if these things are spotted when children are 5 rather than when they're 14, like you say, what kind of a difference would that make?
What kind of a difference? Exactly. Children have issues with numbers and the numbers move around. So sometimes it's not just letters, sometimes it's numbers, sometimes it's both have the ability to read. And it's the education that really defines a country. A smart country, an educated country is able to take care of its people and be able to thrive. And it's important that we stay educated as a country.
Definitely.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, Claire, about literacy?
The only other thing I was going to say, in my trawl through the internet to find statistics, I did find one that was slightly alarming. And I do have friends who teach and have confirmed that from their own experience that this is a thing. And it's in 2023 to 24, 30% of 5-year-olds had not achieved the expected level of literacy, and 21% of them did not reach the expected level in communication and language. That's 5. Another statistic following on from that was that 1 in 4 children in the UK hasn't reached the expected level of reading by the age of 11. Now, for clarity, for any viewers who are not in the viewers or listeners who are not in the UK, when you get to 11 years old, you start your secondary education, so sort of what we call senior school here, and that leads to the first set of national qualifications, which you take at 16, and then you take another set of national qualifications at 18. So if you are starting your secondary school education and your reading age is below that of 11, quite a lot of these children are starting with a reading age of around about 7. Then 2 years into your secondary education, when you actually start learning the curriculum for the examinations, national examinations, they haven't got the level of reading that allows them to access the curriculum. The chances of them getting good grades, or in some cases any grades, is
Mm-hmm.
obviously significantly lower than their peers who can read to the right level or beyond their level.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems to me to be an appalling statistic, considering it's the 21st century. But 2025, to have a quarter of children who can't read to the same level as their age at the time that they get to secondary school is worrying, very, very worrying. And I don't know how we address that, but I really feel like it needs to be addressed because, as I say, I have friends who are teachers who say that there are just children in the classes who simply cannot access what they're teaching them. And that has got to be so frustrating for those children. And we've got a big problem. In fact, it's been much worse since COVID and the pandemic, but we've got a big problem with truancy. Children aren't going to stay in school if they can't do the work. If they can't access the work, they can't produce the work that's required of them. Why are they going to sit in a classroom day after day after day only to feel, that they're lacking in some way? They're not going to, are they? They're going to dive off for the day and go out to the park or something that's a lot more fun. That to me seems like a terrible statistic for 2025.
It is a terrible statistic, and it makes me wonder how many of those children have learning differences. How many of them are brilliant, but they learn differently? How many of them are kinetic learners or have dyscalculia? We were talking earlier how you were saying about some of your students were struggling, and so you changed the color on the page. Well, there's also dyscalculia, which means that how many of those students are just falling through the cracks? And I have known parents who they have dyscalculia, they have dyslexia, they have learning differences, they have ADHD, undiagnosed themselves, and are just so adamant that they figured it out themselves, but they don't want to get their children tested because it's some negative reflection on them. And I just think it's not negatively reflecting on you or your student. It's helping your child get the skills that she or he needs, and they're learning tools so that they can achieve and excel and not struggle as much. Life is filled with struggles. Helping your child is helping your child. They're going to have plenty of other struggles that come along. This doesn't need to be the huge battle. They're going to have plenty more of those in life.
Absolutely. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier, doesn't it? Which is that if there was some way that you could identify that people have got those sorts of struggles, any differences earlier, perhaps they wouldn't fall off at the other end of the system when they're a bit older. You said, most children, it's identified when they're 14. 14 feels to me like it's too late. It's 2 years before you sit your GCSEs in this country.
I can only imagine what that does to a student's self-esteem. And it probably goes on for so long, and they want to hide it, and they're embarrassed. And the problem is that many times they don't know why they're not able to read, especially if they haven't been diagnosed, and that affects their self-esteem. Children recognize it. Children aren't always the kindest in school. They recognize who's reading, who's not reading. It makes them feel like outsiders, and children feel that enough as it is, regardless. And I remember one time I was teaching a class, and a student was so bright. In every class, there's at least one or two students that have it. You call on them, they have an answer for everything. They know the answer, they know it inside and out. This was that student. I knew the student was just so smart. And it came time to do the written test, and the student failed the test. And I was like, what? How did the student fail this test? We talked about this in class. This student knows all these answers. So I asked the student to stay back, and I said, hey, let's talk about this. What happened here? I know you know these answers. And the student explained to me that they had a traumatic brain injury. And because of that, that student wasn't able to memorize certain things. And so I said, okay. I said, how do you feel if I just ask you the questions? And the student said, yeah, that'd be great. I do really well with, if you ask me, I can say it. It's just the student's particularly issues writing things down.
I suppose it's transferring the sort of thought to the paper. It sounds like they could verbalize it, but perhaps ordering it in their mind so they could actually write it down was something that was a problem for them because of their injury.
Yes, something had happened. That was exactly it. So I asked this student all the questions. The student got an A, and I said, from now on, I'm just going to give you all your tests verbally. And the student was like, that's great. I said, but what you need to know is you have a learning difference now. And I bet if you're struggling in my class with written tests, you're probably struggling with other ones. You need to go talk and advocate for yourself and make sure that you're getting this in your other classes as well. And I don't know if the student ever did that, which breaks my heart. And that's why I say, make sure that you advocate for yourself, make sure that you advocate for your child, make sure that you get the help that you need, because like I said, I think this student was embarrassed. I don't think the student wanted to go up and say, hey, I've had a traumatic brain injury. And I'm saying, it's okay. We can work with you.
Yes. And I think this is the problem. People think asking for help is a sign of weakness.
And it's not.
Whereas actually, I think that asking for help is a sign of strength. If you are able to identify what you're struggling with, and then you're able to go and say to somebody, I need help with this because of, and I mean, a traumatic brain injury as well. How come the school hadn't been notified of that happening? Incredible. That seems incredible to me.
It does.
But actually, admitting you have a problem and going and asking for help is strength. It's not weakness. It's just that our society has a tendency to discount anyone who finds something difficult that others are doing. I don't think it's weak to ask for help. I think it's the exact opposite.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
I completely understand the peer pressure, that makes you feel you can't go and ask for help. But I just think we need to change that attitude. Asking for help is a sign of strength.
Yes, it is. Should we toast to everyone today?
Yeah.
I'd like to toast to everyone who is learning to read, however old you are, or helping someone learn to read. This is to you. We see you, we believe in you, and we thank you. And Claire, would you like to add anything to this toast?
I mean, I'd love to, but that was pretty comprehensive.
All right. All right. Well, if that's the case, here's to all of you, and we'll see you again. And thanks for joining us. This is Gayvin Powers with Hidden Heroines of History podcast. Thanks for joining me. We have a great lineup this 2026. I can't wait to share it with you. And thank you so much, Claire, for joining me today. Have a great day.
My pleasure. And you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this, like, share, and subscribe. We have more amazing episodes planned. You can listen to them on the Hidden Heroines of History podcast on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and iHeartRadio.